Welcome to Daily English Room. Today's topic is social media. How often do you use social media, and which platforms do you prefer?
As a university student, I'm always on social media. I use Twitter the most for following environmental activism and academic discussions. Instagram is great for connecting with other students globally. And I use LinkedIn to network with professionals in environmental science. I also love using TikTok to create educational content about climate change.
When did you start using social media?
Being part of Gen Z, I practically grew up with social media. I must have been about 13 when I created my first Instagram account. That would have been around 2014. My parents were quite hesitant at first, but they eventually came around, didn't they? What's fascinating is how my usage has evolved. Whereas I once used social media purely for fun, I now use it primarily for environmental activism and education. That said, I do sometimes envy the older generation who got to experience life before the pressure of constant connectivity.
What kind of people do you like to be friends with on those social media websites?
As an environmental science student and activist, I'm especially interested in connecting with like-minded individuals who are passionate about sustainability and climate action. However, I've learned that it's equally important to engage with people who might not share my views entirely. After all, echo chambers don't lead to productive discussions. What I find particularly valuable are connections with both experts in the field and ordinary people taking small steps towards sustainability. Having said that, I do tend to avoid those who spread misinformation about environmental issues. Life's too short for that.
Is there anything you don't like about social media?
As an environmental science student, what troubles me most about social media is its role in spreading misinformation about climate change. You'd be surprised at how quickly false information can circulate, wouldn't you? Had social media platforms implemented stricter fact-checking measures earlier, we might be facing less skepticism about environmental issues today. What's particularly frustrating is the way social media algorithms can create echo chambers, making it difficult for factual information to reach those who need it most. That said, I'm also concerned about the environmental impact of data centers that power these platforms. It's rather ironic.
Do you think social media has more positive or negative effects on society?
From an environmental perspective, social media has been invaluable for raising awareness about climate change and connecting activists globally. It's helped amplify voices that might not otherwise be heard. However, I'm concerned about the environmental impact of data centers and the constant upgrade cycle of devices to keep up with social media apps. It's a complex issue without easy answers.
How do you think social media will evolve in the next 5 years?
From an environmental science perspective, I hope social media will evolve to become more sustainable and eco-conscious. We might see platforms that incentivize and gamify environmental activism, or better ways to organize and coordinate climate action. I also think we'll see more emphasis on fact-checking and scientific literacy to combat misinformation, especially about environmental issues.
How has social media changed the way you communicate with people from different cultures?
Environmental issues affect everyone, but how they're understood varies culturally. Social media has taught me to frame climate discussions differently depending on my audience. It's also shown me how environmental activism looks different across cultures, which has broadened my perspective significantly. I've learned to use local examples and contexts when discussing global environmental problems.
What's the most surprising opportunity you've gotten through social media?
My TikTok video about local conservation efforts went viral and led to a scholarship opportunity. A university in Canada saw my content and offered me a chance to join their environmental science program for a semester as an exchange student. I never imagined my social media activism would lead to international academic opportunities.
How do you manage your time on social media to stay productive?
As a student, I need to balance social media with my studies. I use the focus mode on my phone during lectures and study sessions. I've created different lists on Twitter, one for environmental news and another for fun, so I can quickly find what I need without getting sidetracked. I also use weekends to schedule my educational content for the upcoming week.
What advice would you give to someone just starting to use social media professionally?
My advice would be to stay true to your message while being open to evolving. When I started sharing environmental content, I was very serious and academic. Over time, I learned to make my message more accessible and even fun, which helped reach a broader audience. Also, don't be afraid to speak up about issues you care about, but be prepared for differing opinions and learn to handle them professionally.
Have you ever taken a break from social media? How did it affect your personal and professional life?
I took a break during my final exams last semester. Academically, it was necessary and helpful. I could focus entirely on studying. I did worry about losing momentum with my environmental advocacy. But I realized that taking care of myself and my education would make me a better activist in the long run. When I returned, my followers were supportive, and I had fresh energy for creating content.
If you could change one thing about how social media works, what would it be and why?
Given the chance to modify social media, I would prioritize fact-checking and scientific accuracy. As an environmental science student, I can't help but notice the spread of misinformation. Were social media platforms to implement stricter verification processes for scientific claims, we might see a more informed public discourse on critical issues such as climate change. That being said, we must also consider the balance between moderation and free expression, mustn't we?
What impact do you think social media will have on future generations, particularly in your field of work?
Let me tell you about my perspective as both a student and an environmental activist. The upcoming generation will have grown up with social media as an integral part of their lives. On the one hand, this could lead to greater global awareness of environmental issues. On the other hand, I can't help but worry about the environmental impact of increased digital consumption. It's something of a double-edged sword, isn't it?
How has your approach to privacy on social media evolved over time?
Being part of the younger generation, you might think I'd be less concerned about privacy, mightn't you? On the contrary, I've become increasingly cautious. Whereas I once shared every detail of my environmental activism, I now carefully consider the potential implications of each post. Given the global nature of environmental issues, I have to be mindful of how my content might be perceived in different cultural contexts. That said, I still believe in the power of social media to drive positive change.
At what age are children generally allowed to use social media in your country?
The situation in Nigeria is quite diverse, varying significantly between urban and rural areas. While the official age requirement for most platforms is 13, enforcement is practically non-existent. In urban areas like Lagos, where I grew up, children as young as 11 or 12 are often already active on social media. Were there more awareness about online safety, parents might be more cautious. That said, many Nigerian parents see social media proficiency as a necessary skill for their children's future, don't they?
That's all for today's Daily English Room Conversation Practice. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this video, like, leave a comment, and hit the subscribe button. See you next time.